Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
In legends and horror stories, ghosts are typically spirits of the dead, those who suffered greatly in their lives, that when their time comes, they choose to linger in this world, to sow hatred and chaos among the living. Do you believe this, that there are vengeful spirits living among us, right here, right now? I do, and my story will tell you why. I'm Martha. I'm 19 years old, and I have a twin sister, Caroline. She wasn't just my sister, but we were best friends and subsequent partners in crime. We suffered a miserable life because we lived in poverty. Our parents were very poor, despite belonging to a rich family. Grandpa, on my dad's side of the family, worked in the petroleum industry, where he made lots of investments and projects. And fortunately, he had a lot of enemies too, many of whom were from mom's side of the family. Dad was the middle son, but he assumed responsibility for Grandpa's work because he was very competent and capable. Similarly, Mom became responsible for her father's work. She did her best to avoid conflict between her side of the family and Dad's side, so that they could work together peacefully. It was at this point, I believe, that vengeful spirits must have come into play. My parents had loved each other since their childhood, but they didn't tell their families about it. In the past, both my grandpas were once friends and partners. They worked together within the same company, but they later became enemies and split the company into two. Both families hated each other that day forth. All of them, except for my parents. Mom's uncles took over her company and fired her. Dad couldn't bear to see Mom in this situation, so he told his dad that he was going to marry her. So his father made him choose between my mother and the company with all the power and wealth that came with it. To Grandpa's chagrin, Dad chose Mom over everything else. And so, they got married and lived together with Grandma. They faced life's problems without any support from anyone. Grandpa felt betrayed by Dad and disowned him. Then, Carolyn and I were born. Dad did his best to make us happy and give us everything we needed. Grandma told us about our family's history and how both our parents had been cut off from their families out of sheer greed and betrayal. It felt a bit unfair, but this was our life now. Then, one day, we heard Dad speaking on the phone, with Mom standing beside him, and they were both acting very nervous. He told her to take care of us, and then he left the house and never came back. Mom never told us where he went or why he left. Sometime after that, Grandma passed away. Our situation was getting worse. We thought we had to do something to help Mom. Maybe we were being influenced by those vengeful spirits I mentioned. But either way, Carolyn and I made our decision to go over to the dark side. We decided to steal, rob, defraud. We were smart enough. Together, we could definitely pull it off. We began with our neighbor, very wealthy, but very cheap. We figured she must be keeping her money somewhere in the house, since she didn't believe in leaving a dime in the bank's care and was completely convinced that they would steal her money. Lucky for us, I guess. And we were right. We infiltrated her house when she was away and found a load of money stashed away under a loose tile on the floor. Took some time to find, but we got it. When we got home, the house was completely deserted. Mom wasn't there. Her clothes were all gone from the wardrobe. We were on our own now. We began exploiting jewelry shop owners. We would pretend to be a wealthy customer and tell the owner that we wanted to take the jewelry home to show our mom and get her opinion. We would drug hotel owners and put all the money in their safe into a bag, then scream and call for help, saying that the owner had just collapsed, creating a diversion and disappearing in the crowd. We were getting quite good at it. Our wealth slowly grew day by day. Mom called, every now and then, to check that we were fine on our own. Of course, she knew nothing about our work, or what we were doing to survive. Our ultimate goal was to earn a lot of money and run away to another country to start a new life. One evening, I was with my friends, and I met a guy named Craig. He was rich, but somehow seemed different than all the people we robbed. Later I found out, to my surprise, that he was our cousin, the grandson of the man that had taken everything away from my mother and fired her. Unsure of what to do, I told Carolyn what I knew. She went ecstatic. She told me that this was our chance to take back everything, the company, the money that belonged to us. But for the first time, we didn't quite agree. Craig was nothing like his father. He wasn't greedy. He was kind and gentle. He often told me that money was a curse if it meant living alone away from people that we care about and cherish. I made up my mind, and I told Carolyn that I couldn't be a part of our evil scheming anymore, and I wanted out, and so I left her and went to live on my own. At this point, I had no idea what Carolyn was up to. In the meantime, Craig was negotiating a deal that would earn his company a lot of profit. He told me to come visit at the company, and then we would go out for dinner. I accepted happily. When I arrived at his company, I sensed someone behind me. Then, suddenly a hand pressed a handkerchief over my mouth, and I passed out. When I woke up, I found Craig unconscious beside me. To the side, I could see his safe was wide open. Papers were scattered everywhere, and in my hand was the key to the safe. Then the police arrived, found the safe key in my hand, and accused me of being a thief. I told them that I had been drugged unconscious, just like Craig. The police officer looked inside my bag and found a bottle of chloroform. I was shocked, to say the least. I couldn't understand what had happened. They took me downstairs and tried to wake up Craig. At about that time, a woman in a black wig came over to me and said, "Martha, you betrayed me." It was Carolyn. I couldn't believe that she framed me. Then she left. Her betrayal hurt me deeply. A part of my brain told me that I had betrayed her first, but that doesn't matter now. When I get out of prison, someday, I resolved to get my revenge on her. We were no longer sisters. Just as we had been betrayed by our families before us, we were now locked into yet another circle of family betrayal. Only it was more personal and closer to home this time. Were they truly vengeful spirits influencing us? I think so. What about you?
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what had happened, there was a knock on the door. It was the Group A and B gangs. The spokesperson for the two groups held a knife in my direction and said, "Hand over the lottery ticket or die where you stand." Needless to say, I handed it over post-haste. But then he said, "I'm sorry, you've seen too much. You have to die." I pleaded, "But I didn't see anything, I swear." Suddenly, there was a flash from a camera, and the whole group of thugs began laughing. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. While relieved that my imminent death had been postponed, I was deeply saddened that I had lost my $1 million chance to get my dream factory. What rubbish. Everyone has his own unique gifts. God gave us these gifts to help us and society. Some people use these gifts for good, while others use them for evil. My story deals with this latter group of people. My name is Bill, and I'm 19 years old. My story begins when my sister Bella and I were both only 13 years old. My family consisted of just her and me. You see, we grew up in an orphanage where none of the children had parents. We used to wonder where we came from and who our parents were, but we could never get any clear answers, so we stopped asking such questions. Our lives had been quite normal up to that point, and then one day, a surprise dropped into our laps. Our parents showed up to take us home. We were stunned. Huh? Where had they been all these years? Why did they suddenly reappear? When we meet them for the first time, they cried and hugged us and apologized profusely. They told us that they would tell us everything when they took us home. So home we went. They had a large house. Dad was wealthy, and Mom was very educated. When we asked why they had abandoned us for 13 years, they told us that they were too poor to raise us, but now they were much better off financially, and they were able to take care of us now. Bella and I had felt like we had won the lottery and gone to heaven. We even had servants. We ate food dishes that we hadn't heard of before. We visited beautiful places and lived like a royal family. We were enjoying our new lives immensely. They treated us so nicely. Too nicely, in fact. Bella and I talked privately about why our parents were being so nice to us. They never criticized our behavior or made any demands off of us. This seems strange because we had heard about other kids whose parents were always arguing with them and forcing them to behave in a certain way. Then one day, we had stayed up late and we overheard our parents talking. Mom said, "Now's the right time. They are in good health and can bring us a lot of money." Dad replied, "But I've grown fond of them." Mom said, "Your kind heart will land us in prison. We just need to take them to the arranged place so we can sell their hearts and kidneys to our affiliates." Whoa! After hearing this macabre conversation, we sneaked out of the house and ran all the way to the orphanage. We told our caregivers what we had overheard, and they relayed our story to the police. The police then visited our new home, but found it empty. So Bella and I are still orphans today, and if those two people were our real parents, we'd prefer to just remain orphans a little longer, thank you very much.